the Arena Football Hall of Fame has returned, and we want you to become a part of the family. Introducing the Arena Football Hall of Fame Patreon. Whether an All-Star or a Hall of Famer, our reasonably priced tiers each have their own exclusive perks. Early access to the AFL Rewind podcast, honorary selection committee member, and much more. Help us build a Hall of Fame we'll all be proud of. Head to patreon.com/AF Hall of Fame to join. Welcome to AFL Rewind, a look back at all things arena football, sponsored by Phenom Elite. I'm your host, Tim Capper. When you look at all the cities that have been in the Arena Football League in its history, usually each city has a name that if you mention it to somebody on the streets, they'll know exactly who you're talking about. They'll know what they did for this team and what they meant for the city. Well, luckily this episode, we have a person just like that. This gentleman became a very, very well-known member of the Milwaukee Mustangs, even though he may have left right near the end of his career. But to this day, if you mention the name Gary Compton in Milwaukee, it'll bring back the memories of what he did for the Milwaukee Mustangs. Well, on this episode of the podcast, as we know, we try to do from time to time, go back and talk to the people who really made a name for themselves in the AFL, but also made a name for the Arena Football League. With us this episode is a gentleman who I'm sure you know. If you've been a lifer like I am, you know who this gentleman is. On the phone with us now, we have the one, the only Gary Compton. Hey, Gary, thanks for joining us.
Hey, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
We know you got started with the Texans back in '92, but I want to find out from you, how did you find out about the game of arena football, and what were your initial thoughts?
Well, the first time I had found out about arena football, Mike Trigg, who I played college ball with, who was my college quarterback, who was up in Detroit with the Drive and Markham and those guys, he won a championship up there. And he came back to a spring practice. I would have been a senior that year, and he came back and he was working out, throwing in this crazy looking uniform. And, and I was like, what the hell is this? And he's like, oh, this is my arena team that I play for up in Detroit. And I was like, arena football, huh? Because you never really caught on because it was all still so new back then, 88, 89. And, so I was like, okay, that's kind of cool. Then, Coach Trigg, who's one of the lifers as well, and, who was one of my coaches for such a long time everywhere that I went. He got into Dallas. That's where we were both from in that area. Mm-hmm. And then after, I got out of college, had a short stint in the NFL, the CFL, the World League, and, kind of took all those cups of coffee everywhere. I landed back home in Dallas and, got the first chance to play with the Dallas Texans in '92 at the old Reunion Arena and played for, Jerry Trice and Coach Trigg. And we practiced over at Pennington Field in Euless, Texas. And it was needless to say, it was very, very different, something I wasn't really used to, living 4 or 5 guys to an apartment, 2 beds into an apartment, trying to figure out how the hell you're going to sleep. Getting over to practice, not knowing if you have equipment or not, what you're supposed to be wearing, getting equipment out of a trunk. So, it was kind of my first slap in the face with all of it. It's one of those things, is this something that I really wanted to do? But as years went forward with everything else, I wouldn't have traded it for the world. It was a great experience. Like you said, this is a league of lifers. This is a league that's very, very close. You'll still see today on Twitter and things, people will post things and everybody will, respond. Yeah. And it's just, it was a very, very great, neat league and all of that, I was glad to be a part of.
Obviously you're very well known for obviously not only being the wide receiver, but also being on the defensive line also because defensive side, because at that time, Iron Man football was very, very prevalent. How coming out of college and just basically playing 100-yard football, what was it like trying to get used to the 50-yard field and the walls and whatever, the first time that you suited up for Dallas?
Well, obviously the game's a lot faster. And that's one thing that you had to realize that, it's such a fast paced game. And obviously you had to be aware of these barriers that are sitting as quote unquote, what we called sidelines, and everywhere that I've played, except for one place, those walls are undefeated. They've never lost. When you take some contact into those walls and it's like hockey and you hit those things. And if you don't really start learning how to play the game inside of that and not trying to run into the walls and all of that, I've seen a lot of careers get cut short because people didn't know how to play the game the right way with it and all of that. And, it's just one of those things you had to learn. You had to learn how to play it, how to create your game and not take hits into the walls and, be careful. I've seen guys break elbows diving over walls. I've got a great story for you. I'll tell you in a minute, up in Albany in a playoff game as we start progressing here. But yeah, it's just one of those things you had to learn. It was very fast paced and, had to pick up on it quickly.
What about playing on the other side of the ball? Because, obviously you were more known as a wide receiver itself, but in college. But, how was it playing both ways? Because, that was the game that was being played now. It's not like the NFL. It wasn't like the CFL. You were playing both ways in the Arena League. How hard was it getting used to playing on the opposite side of the ball that you were normally used to playing?
Well, it was funny when my first 2 years, I played the middle safety. And it was so funny because you would go score on offense and you would flip right around and you would be covering the guy that you just scored on, and so that part of it took a little toll, as the game started getting faster and guys started getting faster. Coach Trigg and I, we sat down and we talked and he's like, hey, you know what? Let's play the jack linebacker. And, back then, as you said, it was a two-way game, You played the jack linebacker, quote unquote. That's where they, a lot of people say, you would hide a wide receiver because you had to use them. But we were very smart in that whole thing, especially playing on the offensive side and knowing what's going on in the game itself. You could do a lot of damage over there, and picking off passes and all of that. And, and I always say, too, Greg Hopkins and I used to always give each other shit, who was the best jack linebacker to ever play. But it was one of those deals to where, played that spot and everything. And then as you got down to the goal line, you would almost hope they would not take some big boy and put him in the backfield because you knew he was getting the football and you knew they were fixing to run the ball right at you. So, it was one of those things where coaches would try to run defenses, to give you help and all of that. But it was great. Ironman football, as I've always said it, there's no better football than that because you can be good on one side, you have to be good on the other. And if you're not good on both sides of the ball, you can't cut it in that league. And I think that's what kind of separated arena football for many years.
Yeah. Now, your first year in Dallas, in '92, record aside, I know you guys were 5-5, but how was it being a first-year Arena League player being coached by John Paul Young?
JP was very interesting. JP was one of those guys that, West Texas guy, always wore a cowboy hat to practice. Always cut a cigar in half, chew on it, spit all over you while he's talking to you. But he was a great guy. You know what? He taught, he knew the game of football. He had been around for a lot of years. He had coached over there, with Bum and those guys. And, it was just one of those things where you took it in. You were new. You were a rookie at this game. You had to learn, like I said, learn all the nuances of it. And, he was a great guy to get started with and all of that. And, like I've always told everybody, he was my first coach, the one that brought me, helped bring me into the game and everything. So, definitely my hat's off to him for allowing him to, let me be able to play the game.
Yeah. You were talking about was it the playoff game in Albany that you were talking about in '92 that you wanted to tell the story about? Or is it?
Yeah. So we're playing. So we win the division in Dallas. Okay. And we have a chance to have a home playoff game. Okay. Well, we couldn't obviously guarantee as many seats as what Albany could.
Right.
Okay. Because Albany, was very, very good back then. So we ended up having to forfeit our home playoff game, and we had to go to Albany because they would split the gate receipts with us. Okay. So we're already pissed off about that, and we're having to fly to Albany and everything else. And, that's a ruckus crowd up there in the old Knickerbocker Arena and, all those guys. And it's probably the third quarter, and I'm the middle receiver, so I'm the guy in motion, and I run a post route, and Todd Hamill, quarterback, throws the ball, and he throws it over the side of the wall. Okay, well, I kept running. Here again, kind of new with all this. I kept running and got hit and got flipped over the wall. And when I got flipped over the wall, I bet you I had probably 30 cups of beer being poured all over me by all the fans. And you could not get me out of there fast enough, get back on the field. And I'm like, holy shit, is this how it is? Because that's one of the rougher places that we played at.
Yeah.
Is that how it is in this game? And, you hear so many stories about that with guys, over the years and everything else. It's just, it was crazy.
It's not something that you usually think of coming from Albany. Actually, you would think that maybe of Orlando or Arizona,
right,
or Tampa Bay. But I mean, it's I never, because that's where I saw my very first game too, was in Albany. So it's just a year later actually. So that's very interesting here. Now being first time pro, hearing that. I mean, I would thought that the Reunion Arena held more people than the Knickerbocker Arena. What really was the reasoning? Is that what they actually told you? Is that because you guys weren't going to draw as well?
That's what they told us, because they knew we wouldn't draw very many fans. So they figured, okay, if we go to Albany and they've got, I forget what the hell, like 12,000.
Yeah, the whole
Okay.
Yeah.
And we split the gates at 6. Well, that's probably more fans than we're going to get in Dallas. And and that's how the owners were, because they were trying to pay their bills week to week. If you weren't one of the first 14 guys running the bank on Tuesday afternoon with your paycheck before practice, hell, you played for free that week.
Right.
So that's kind of what it was, and everything else. But, we went up there, played, we gave them a fight and everything else. But unfortunately, we lost. And, that was the end of that year.
Actually, well, no, the good thing is actually you won. Remember, you actually went the next year and you played the next week and you played in Detroit.
Oh, that's right. That's right. You know what? There you go. You are right. That is a win. And they go to Detroit and got spanked up in Detroit. Yeah. That is correct. You are right about that.
Yeah, the thing is, if you think about it, the first year in football, you kind of get screwed on your home playoff, but yet you go into Albany where you're forced to go, you win, and you get the extra check. But then, as you said, you go to Detroit and they just handed it to you guys. So
then you got to go play the Detroit Drive where they had all the superstars.
Yeah,
But the good thing about it was afterwards you got to eat Little Caesars pizza and they had beer in the locker room. So so that was always good.
Yep, and a nice arena too, and a nice arena on top of that. So.
Very, very. The Joe Louis that's one of my favorite arenas. I really liked that place. That was a neat setup, and they drew very, very well there.
Yeah. 93 comes along. You end up getting a new head coach. I've asked this many a time, but I'm just curious to know from your point of view, what was it like being a second year player now? I guess anywhere in football, you end up changing head coaches. As a player, how does it make you feel that you're one guy is out for whatever reason, why JP was out, and you get Coach Trice as your head coach?
Well, it's kind of it's kind of one of those things to where. I guess kind of you look at it as players, too. You get into these things and they're not what, you thought they were. You were sold a bill of goods or something else, and, you play out the year of it and you say, you know what, learn my lesson or whatever, and, walk away and move on. Back then, we're talking about the league only being around 6 years.
Yeah.
Stability was hard. Players, owners, GMs, coaches, referees, arenas, everything, nothing was stable besides, some of the places, like you said, Tampa, Orlando, there's only a handful of them.
Right.
So Coach Trice came along and, another funny guy, another Texas guy.
Yep.
Really, really enjoy Coach Trice. I still speak to him. Matter of fact, I had breakfast with him and Coach Trigg about 8 months ago down in Commerce, Texas. And everything. He was a good guy, and there again, and kind of the same caveat and the same, component to that, was Coach Trigg. Coach Trigg being the offensive coordinator.
Right.
And, so we stuck around there in Dallas in 93 and, had some good times and all of that and played with some good people.
What do you think the difference was that year? Because obviously you're only 3-9 that year. What do you think? Some players will tell different stories. The record does not necessarily equal how good a team actually is and how good the players actually are. What for that?
I think. I think a lot of it was that second year we were there. We had a lot of turnover.
Okay.
And it's anything else, and people will always tell you, it's hard to play, especially when you're coming in, and it's your second year and you're playing with a bunch of new guys. Some other guys left, some other guys went to other teams. As anything else back there, it was almost kind of back in those days. It was almost you went to the highest bidder.
Yeah.
Okay, because everything was everybody was doing illegal things back then. We all know that. And it was just one of those deals where we never, we couldn't click. I think we had good talent, but we just never could click and never could get over the hump that year. And I think maybe that was part of. After that happened, and in '90 they'd had a lot of success that they thought, well, maybe arena football's time to move on here in Dallas.
Which actually leads to my next point too. It's funny, the Texans don't exist. They fold. They don't exist anymore. But you still get to stay in the state of Texas because you catch on with the Fort Worth Cavalry. So you're just basically a hop, skip, and a jump away from where you were before. What was it like playing for a first year team?
That now. That was different because Coach Trigg was in charge.
True.
Okay? Coach Trigg kind of put his fingerprints on everything. He had brought in, a lot of some former people that had some experience, and things like that. But again, you're playing for a new organization,
right?
And everything back in those days, it wasn't about the money. We all know that. We weren't making thousands and thousands of dollars. It was more about where was I going to eat and where was I going to stay.
Mm-hmm.
And how can I catapult myself to try to get another shot up to where if I wanted to go to the NFL or anything like that.
Right.
And but it was a good time in Fort Worth. We played at the convention center, old arena. Great time there in Fort Worth. Liked it a lot. Thought it was going to stay around for a while. I thought, we had a chance there, but it was short-lived. And, as anything else, and we all know about arena football. If you Google it all and you start looking at teams, there are hundreds and hundreds of teams that are in one, in one and out the other. Woody Kern, who owned us,
right,
was big into minor league baseball.
Yeah,
it had a bunch of minor league baseball teams, and I think maybe he thought that he could get into this thing and. It would be like minor league baseball, but, whatever happened there in Fort Worth, obviously it was short. And, so now it's 3 years in and, I played for two teams and, and lo and behold, the quote unquote, the Cavalry were going to go to Monterrey, Mexico.
Yep.
That's where we told we were going to be. And, so we're all fired up. We're going to go to Mexico, hang out on the beach, the water all summer. And then lo and behold, that all fell apart. And now becomes a dispersal draft.
Okay. How was it? Well, before we talk about the dispersal draft, I mean, that first year, I mean, even though you guys went 5-7, by the way, Woody Kern, as people know, that he went on to own the Tampa Bay Storm and et cetera, et cetera. So,
Yep.
1994 was really your first breakout year. You had an amazing year on the field itself. I mean, you had your first 1,000-yard receiving year, 69 receptions, 17 touchdowns. I mean, you finally seem to be able to. You're getting used to the game itself. And
that's true. The third year in, the game became, a little bit easier. Like I said, you started learning the nuances of things. You started learning, how to master your craft. The first 2 years in it, you're just trying to tread water. It's like anything else, trying to learn a system, something that's new. And that was a breakout year. Had some good games during that course of the season, and just kind of try to build from there every year.
Yeah, because I'm looking at the team here. I mean, it's I'm looking at the I remember. It's funny, I talk to you now, and all those years later, back in '94, I remember you guys coming into Albany because I was actually at that game, and seeing you guys play. So it's actually no, you
Isn't
guys.
That funny?
Yeah. I mean, and you won. It's that's the thing. You won in overtime in Albany. So I mean, it was.
Yep. It was crazy.
It was an amazing game, amazing time. So, is it tough not playing? Because you played in averaging about 5,000, 6,000 people in Dallas. You're playing in less now in Fort Worth. Did it sour you in any way about when it came to fan interaction and how fans were liking this game of arena football? Or was it like, I'm just here to play football?
Well, I think what you start to realize is, when you start going to, the Tampa Bays and they're playing in St. Pete, over there, and they're putting 25,000 in the stands. You go down to Orlando and it's sold out, or you go to Detroit, you go to these different places and you're wondering, well, how is it all like that? But it's not like that here in Dallas. Is there too much to do? The sports, just nobody cares about it. Does really nobody care about the game? And we used to enjoy going on the road and playing because we knew we were going to play in front of a huge crowd. And, and a lot of people like that, you don't want to be playing a football game to where I can hear the guy next to me talking and, there's nobody, there's really nobody in the stands. Yeah. And there's been arena football games like that many, many of times at many, many of places. So it kind of, getting back to your question, it kind of, was a sour taste. You're at home, you're supposed to have a home field advantage, but it's like every time somebody came into your home arena and all that, is like it was a neutral site, Right.
Heading into 95, as you said, the Cavalry don't last past 94. But 95 is really when I think everybody remembers you the most, obviously, Gary, because if they think of you, they think of you in the Milwaukee purple. How did you, obviously with Coach Trigg going there too, was that the reason why you went to Milwaukee, or was there any other reason?
No, he was the sole reason. Yeah. He called me up when they did the dispersal draft, and he said, "Hey, we got the number 4 pick. I'm going to take you. You want to come to Milwaukee?" And I said, "Coach," I said, "I'll tell you what." I said, wherever you go and you always want me to play for you, I said, I'm there. No ifs, ands, and buts about it. Like I said, my family knew Mike, way back. And, he was, it's hard as a player to say I got all my trust in a coach because it's just, you're two different avenues there. But I can honestly say that with him, I trusted in what he was trying to do. I knew he wouldn't steer me wrong. I knew he would, do right by me. And still, again, he didn't have to take me. I could have went anywhere else, or maybe I couldn't have played the game anymore. I could have had a 3-year arena football career, and that would have been it, Right. And I've always told him that, to this day, that, he prolonged my career, obviously, because a lot of places he went to, I played for him. But that allowed me to come up to the Midwest. It was different up here, but boy, I tell you what, when you start talking about playing in front of crowds and people getting rowdy and all of that, this place in Milwaukee was one of the best to play for.
Yeah, the Bradley Center, I remember, was rocking. It was a place where you wanted, if you could have a good matchup with a team, no matter where they were from, Milwaukee was the place to play. Now, 95 started off a little bit different, though, and then your normal years, if I'm not mistaken. Did you take part in those 3 early games over in Europe?
Yes, I did. We went over there, and we played in Barcelona, Madrid, and somewhere.
Yeah, you played in Spain, Zaragoza, Granada, and Madrid, and as you said, so it's
Yeah. So we went over there and played early in those 3 games before the season. Kind of that was back when they wanted to do test markets. They were thinking the game could get overseas and do all of that. They had done some of that in the past, and so I was able to go over there and play a little bit and everything. And then I am trying to remember with that because something happened with me in '95, and I think. I'm not going to remember if I broke my collarbone. Okay. I believe that's what happened, and it might have been in Orlando when we were playing there. And what I believe, if I'm not correct, I had a situation to where, and here again, these are so totally different things. Yeah. I had a situation where I live in Milwaukee part of the week, and I'd fly to Dallas and live part of the week.
Okay. Huh. Having a broken collarbone, I'm sure that's not very easy to deal with, though.
No, not at all. Not at all. One of the most painful things ever. I can only imagine. But here again, the first year up here in Milwaukee, great place. People were, they went 0 for their first year. Yeah. And Saban was the head coach up here that first year. They got rid of him. They drew very well up here, and it was a great market. It was a great market up here, and as we get through here and we continue to tell the story and all of that, just what a great place to play.
You have any more? What was your first thought when you first were asked to go and play in Spain, and then what was your reaction to this foreign crowd? Because as you said, the league was they were looking at possibly starting up a European division, which never came to fruition. But what were your initial thoughts of the crowd, how they understood the game? Because I've seen a few. I think I've seen an actual game from Barcelona that's available on the internet. And it seems different, obviously, because we're used to the different crowds, et cetera, et cetera. But what were your overall impressions of the fans in Spain?
But, it was different. You think about it, because so here's this, this foreign game that these people really don't know what it is. Obviously it's something to do. So, hey, let's go check it out. Okay. So you get out there and everything else, and you're warming up, and it's kind of quiet, and you get lined up for the kickoff. Then all of a sudden the kicker kicks the ball and the whole place goes nuts. Okay. All right. Wow. That's kind of cool. So you get in a huddle, they all sit back down, your call play, it's silent.
Yeah.
Okay, you go score. The kicker comes out, kicks a field goal. The whole place goes nuts. So it was their part of thinking it soccer and a kicker, and everything.
Yeah.
But it was neat. It was cool to go tour those cities and play in those arenas. I'll never forget the last spot that we played in was almost like a helidrome with the bikes, and
really?
the end zones in the corner would be almost like 2 yards higher than it would be about 2 yards down below. So everybody would try to run a fade route up in the corner because you would be like 6 feet taller than the other guy, in that one part of the end zone. Yeah. So, they made it work, in any spot that they could have it. But like you said, it was more of going over and, trying to do this European tour, get European, try to get arena football started over there. We kind of see that now, when they were doing the AFL overseas there in China and, things like that. But it was a great experience to go over there, play the game with some great people and some, a couple other teams over there and have a little fun.
And you know what? I love hearing that anecdote about the higher with the rising of the field itself, because that's something, if we weren't there, the games weren't televised, and
right.
That's a cool little anecdote. That's pretty cool. That's something I hadn't heard before, so that's pretty neat. Hey, one thing I had to ask you too is, obviously, your career started off differently than a lot of others did in arena football. What were your thoughts going into, and this ties into you playing over in Europe, what were your thoughts of a pure rookie quarterback coming in and getting his first taste of arena football, and a guy who, I think a lot of people will remember who he is, happened to be a quarterback of yours, Clint Dozel. What was your thought on a pure rookie quarterback just learning the game in an exhibition game for the very first time?
Right, and it's funny because Clint and I went to the same university, and I got to watch him play.
Okay.
And very, very good quarterback. But, it was different too. You're talking about somebody that hasn't ever played the game. Mm-hmm. Okay, just, coming out there kind of the first time and, trying to figure it all out. And the game moved a little bit faster. As I said, as anything when you're a rookie playing this game. But you know what, Clint did a great job. It's always funny, and I always tell everybody, there's been a lot of great quarterbacks in this arena football league. And I was fortunate enough to play with the one that broke the record first, in Todd Hamill.
Yeah.
But I've always said, no disrespect to Sed Bonner and, who was great and, all those other quarterbacks. But if I could have had two quarterbacks to play with, it would have been Todd Hamill and it would have been Clint Dozel.
Yeah. And I think that's what I love hearing about players, because, people can be chosen certain things in all-time history, but players have an idea of considering who's the best based on who they've played with. And as you said, it's no slight on them. It's just that you know them in a way better than others do.
Exactly. And you know what? And, Eddie Brown would tell you, with Pulowski and, Mike and those guys, you know what? Hunky and Gaywood are going to tell you said all day long because they played with them. They played with them for so long.
Yeah.
And it's just one of those deals. I think when you get comfortable with your quarterback as a receiver, it's just one of those things. And I mean, you see it in the modern game today, we've seen it with Brady and his guys, Edelman for so many years and Gronk. I mean, you just know where you're going to be and you trust that guy. And I think, I was glad to have those two quarterbacks.
As I said, 95 wasn't, as I said, you got injured, so your stats were slightly lower than the year before, but I mean, it's, that can't happen in the game itself. I mean, but then you head over to 96 and you guys are one of the class teams in the league that year. You guys went 10-4. You seem to be, you're getting these rivalries together now with these different teams. I think Iowa, obviously, you and Iowa seem to be getting it together, getting on pretty good. You and St. Louis. What in your earlier days? I mean, as I said, now that you guys are starting to win now in '96, in your opinion, and I guess any time in Milwaukee or whatever, but what was your favorite rivalry? Obviously, earlier on, it seemed to be Albany because of how it started. But for you, who do you think your favorite rivalry was?
Well, you know what? Early on, I want to have to say St. Louis.
Okay.
Because you know what? We went down to St. Louis and we played some barn burners down there. With those guys, and that's back in the day when Darrell Hammond first started.
Mm-hmm.
And things like that. With those guys, and it's 5 hours from us. It's not very far. It's almost it's like baseball, Milwaukee and Chicago today. Things like that. So that was one of the good rivalries we like to have. They always had a great crowd there. Always liked playing there. I always liked playing against them. Then obviously later on, I think the Iowas and when Kurt Warner was in, and those things. I mean, you talk about a place to play. Now, anybody that can sit in Iowa in the stands on a bench and have somebody taking a cast iron skillet and a hammer and bang it in your ear for 3 hours, and you still have not lost your mind and still have to go out there on that field and play. I mean, I tell you what, that would get to you.
Yeah. Well, what do people tell you when you say that you played against Kurt Warner?
Well, it's funny because everybody's like, yeah, where? That's the first thing they ask. And I'm always like, well, he started. You know what? He started where we all started. He started in the Arena Football League, and if it wasn't for the Arena Football League, he probably would not have had that opportunity.
Yeah.
As a few of the guys that played this game, had that. We did a 5th anniversary poster here in Milwaukee. Mm-hmm. That they did a big print, and and on that print, Kurt Warner's on there, and I have it framed up in my living room and all that. But I get a lot of questions on that. You really played against Kurt Warner, and I was like, yeah, you know what, and he was really, really good too. In this game, this game was built for him, and and obviously it showed for him moving on. But yeah, it's nice. To be able to play against some guys like that you see go on, and have a Hall of Fame career in the NFL, and be like, you know what, I've lined up in battle with that guy before.
Yep, that's so cool. That really is cool because it's if depending on how old you were, you may only thought of Kurt Warner came, and most people don't. I said like yourself, don't remember where people started their careers at. So it's
correct.
It's now. Wasn't there a unique thing? And I'm trying to remember if it was St. Louis or Memphis because you played St. Louis and Memphis that year in '96 at St. Louis and at Memphis. Which arena was it that had these smaller than normal boards? Was that St. Louis?
No, that was Memphis.
That was Memphis.
St. Louis was set up for hockey.
Okay.
So you could use those hockey boards.
Because it seemed like the Memphis ones came up to your waist, if that.
Yes. Oh yeah, if that. Yeah, and there's many a times that people have you flipped over that wall there at Memphis. There's no doubt about that. But I'll tell you what another one that kind of came and went. Mm-hmm. But what a great place to play. There at the
pyramid.
At the pyramid there. And what great barbecue! Oh my gosh!
Oh yeah,
yes. I had some of the best barbecue ever, and that I've eaten in Memphis. So yeah, this is some great places to play. That's for sure. There.
As I said, you guys were 10-4, made it to the playoffs. Your year obviously was a little bit better than the year before. Let me ask you this: now that your career really has taken off, was there ever at a time? Because obviously, still we're at the time of Ironman football. Was there ever a time where you wish you could have been an Eddie Brown type of player where you only played wide receiver? Or by this time, was it like, you know what? Defense and offense, I'm so used to both. I don't mind playing either or.
Well, I think you would, I think everybody wanted to be an offensive specialist, and that's what they were called, and only play on offense. You're playing every series, right. Because if we remember, back in the day, usually – you would play offense, defense, and you'd have to come out for a break. Mm-hmm. As it got later on, we could play, more minutes and all that. But, it's one of those deals where your game's just different. When you have guys, that I played with, the Alvin Ashleys and the Larry Ray Willises, mm-hmm. and, those type of guys that, could get it done on the offensive side. But maybe didn't want to play defense. Coach didn't want to put them in defense. It was one of those deals. I just kind of got the knack for, playing that linebacker spot, and kind of liked it. And, just kind of went with it and said, hey, this is what I'm supposed to do. And I'm going to, I want to be the best at it.
Now, as can happen in the arena football, again, actually has happened in other leagues too, but sometimes there are those games where you have to play teams on back-to-back weeks. You guys had to do that this year, but the interesting tidbit about it is that you play Albany in the last game of the regular season, and then you play at Albany. At home, and then you had to play again at Albany in the playoffs. First of all, what is it like playing a team back to back?
Well, it's really hard when you especially then when you know that whether we won, if we won, we were going to play them at home. And if they won, they were going to play us at home. So we knew we were going to get them twice, but you'd rather get the following week in the playoffs, a win versus, the last win of the regular season. But it's hard to play, teams back to back because, especially there, you're trying to win that last game. So you're giving everything that you got. You're putting everything out there, play wise and all that to get that. And then you got to turn around vice versa. Now you're playing, one game eliminations. And it's unfortunate too, because, we were, and it always seems like, when I'm talking about being in the playoffs playing, I'm always talking about playing Albany in my career for some reason. It seems like I played them a lot and everything. But yeah, it was unfortunate there. We didn't get that win and had to go up to Albany and play that following weekend.
So for them, for you guys, it was a win and you host, but a win and then they were to host because at the time I think they came into the game at 9-4. You guys had already had your 10th win, so they got you based off the old head-to-head, didn't they?
Yes, sir, they did. And unfortunately, like you said, we went up there that next weekend and, again, a ruckus crowd, playoff crowd, it just fell a little bit short.
Going into 97, slight step back. I mean, 8-6, but still not nothing to put your nose up at. But for yourself, you had your second best receiving yardage in your career that year. You had 920 yards. Again, you're getting them from, when I think of, and as I said, everybody remembers you. They remember Todd Hamill because Todd Hamill, however long he was in the league. I mean, he was in the league for such a long period of time also. But how was it being, would you have considered yourself the number one to Todd Hamill, even though you may not have led the team in yards and touchdowns every year?
Well, yeah, I think, it's always tough with that because, you don't, I mean, when it's all said and done, yeah, you know what, you want all the touchdowns, you see everybody, you see these guys scoring 9 touchdowns, right. 17 receptions, but if you really think about it, they're all the offensive specialists.
Okay.
They're not your two-way guys. Just because of the fact that you're going to end up having to sit out, catch a breath, like I said, or a rotation floats around. But with TH, like I said, he was my quarterback for so long. He always knew where I was going to be, and I always knew what he was trying to do. And it's a very, very weird dynamic when you start talking about that with a quarterback. I remember some games that, I'd be like, damn, dude, you put the ball right there. And he's like, I knew you were going to be right there. That's why I did it. So to get back to your question, yeah, did I always think I was number one to him? Sure, I did, with that part, because I always, in my mind and all that, hey, when it comes down to, needing something, 5's looking for 2, and we're going to get this done.
Yeah. 8-6 that year. It was a year of runs for you guys. I mean, lose 2, win 5. Lose 4, win 3. Yep. You did make the playoffs, though. I mean, for a team, though, obviously you want to try to be as steady throughout the year as possible. Do runs frustrate you did they frustrate you as a player or your team itself? Because you think you run off you're 5-0 at one point in the last 5 games, but then you lose 4 in a row, which I'm sure you thought you could easily have won them, or you run into a team that you didn't expect to. Do runs frustrate players, or is it just you're just trying to stay in the mindset of just playing the game each week and trying to be better than how they are?
Well, I think, they'll frustrate you a little bit, like you said, when you go on, a 4-win, run and you lose one and you say, okay, well, you know what? That's okay. You know, you lose another one, you say, okay, well, what the hell's going on? You lose another one, you're like, all right, you know, what is happening here? Why are we like we were, you know, in this month, but yet this month we can't win a game. You know, is it because we played at home, that we're on the road? You know, what's going on? And you just, like I said, at the end of the, you know, you try to go out and just play your game because you can't control it. You can't control what everybody else does. You can only control what you do.
Right.
You know, you go out and play, and you know what? You let the chips, you know, fall where they may. And like you said, you know, we were on a short end of some of those games that we should have won. You know, and thought that, you know, we would have had a better record than that.
I think for the first time you actually played a team different in the playoffs that you had in your career. First time you got out to Arizona, and as everybody knows, Arizona, you're talking about those places where you just love to play, considering how good the fans are. Arizona is one of those places, and was it intimidating going into Arizona for the first time in the playoffs? Well, you know, in the playoffs.
Yeah, and you know what? And you know, we had been out there before. We played out there before, but you know, playoffs is a whole new level out there. You know, and you know, when you go out to Arizona and play, you got to bring your A game because the crowd is definitely, you know, you don't have that going in your factor. You know, and it's a very, very tough place to play against a very, very good team. You know, always love playing against Hunky and Sed and Gatewood and those guys, you know, and all of that. And, you know, wish we could have won out there and everything. But here again, you know what, we fell short that year in the playoffs, and, you know, just had to kind of look back and see what we could do better and move forward.
98, there were some changes for you. Still with the Mustangs, but you had a change in head coach. In your opinion, you're looking at Trigg versus Coach Frazier. Was Frazier the right guy to be the head coach for you at that time?
Well, I think I will go on the record to say this. I think Coach Trigg was done wrong. You know, when he moved on. I understand management have decisions to make. Okay, I get all that. You know, and you got to do what's best for your team. But I think, you know, as you said, when you go 10-4, you go 8-6, and you get rid of a coach.
Yeah.
You know, there's more than, you know, the dynamic there. You know, and it left a bitter taste in some of our mouths. You know, Coach Frazier was there with us. You know, he was our defense coordinator. And I think maybe that, you know, the organization thought because Coach Frazier was older and had more head coaching, you know, years underneath his belt, maybe, that he might have been the right guy to get the team going. You know, I still say to this date that I think, you know, management, and I want, you know, and when I say management with the Mustangs, everybody knows who we're talking about. You know, that I thought that, you know, they did a disservice to Coach Trigg and all that, and moving him on, because I think we had some things that were going very, very good for us here, and had everything right on the table. And, you know, as Bum Phillips, you know, used to say, well, you know what, we've knocked on the door a few times and all that, you know, and we thought we had a chance to kick the door in, but we just, you know, after he left, we just didn't have that opportunity.
Yeah. Even though you were 7-7 that year, you put up your best career numbers ever. So you and Todd were, as we were talking before, you know, 1-2. But also that year, you guys started probably one of the best rivalries other than the Warren I-4 and San Jose and Arizona and et cetera. But you guys, for the first time, were able to go and play the Grand Rapids Rampage. You guys got to, that was, as I said, it became one of the must-see games of the week, if possible. That game was on local television. What was it like playing against Grand Rapids? Well,
and if people don't know, Coach Trigg became the new head coach with Grand Rapids.
Yep.
So, you know, there was some animosity. You know, there was a lot of fire. We knew that, you know what, these are revenge games, if you want to call them that they're going to do whatever they have to do, excuse me, to come out on top. And if they get a chance to embarrass us, they will embarrass us. So we better be ready to come play. And, you know, get after it. Don't think of them as an expansion team. And again, you know what, to go play in Grand Rapids, what a great place to play at.
Yeah.
You know, fans in that arena and everything. And, so that was very, very interesting. That became, like you said, that became a must-see TV WWE primetime Saturday night match.
Yeah. And it didn't matter if that place only held just over 10,000. It didn't matter because sometimes it can be less, can be more. Smaller arena, sort of similar to Albany, similar to what it is in Iowa, also in Des Moines. You get enough people in there, the place is just going to be absolutely. It's going to make your ears ring by the end of the game, I'm sure.
Yes, and it was a zoo in there. You're absolutely right. It sure was. They did a great job with that crowd there, and I always I wanted to make sure that we were always playing there. I just, for whatever reason, I like going to Grand Rapids and playing.
When Coach Trigg went to Grand Rapids, did he at any point ask you to come over? Or considering where we are currently in this time of the AFL, salaries are getting up there, and then players are making a pretty good living on it. Were you ever at any point asked to come and join them, or was it were you happy where you were in Milwaukee?
Well, it had become a deal to where, I had been here now for 4 seasons. Okay. And it started living here and everything and became comfortable. I was actually a substitute teacher, and then I coached football here in the off season.
Okay.
So I kind of, quote unquote, if you want to say, you kind of make a name for yourself.
Right.
But the door was always open. If I wanted to, then he would do everything he could to trade for me.
Okay.
Excuse me. But I knew that they would not let me go here. And so, excuse me. So I just made sure, stay here and play and make this my home and all of that. And I don't think I would have changed it. It was unfortunate. Like you said, we'll kind of, as we're going year by year, it's unfortunate that it did happen from here. But at that point in time, I was good to go. And you know what? Coach, I love you and all that, but you know what? When we suit up, it's time to kick your ass.
you can be friends before, again, you got to have a beer after, but once kickoff comes around, as you said, you're enemies.
Exactly, absolutely right.
You'd had a taste of the playoffs for the last couple of years. Did it frustrate you that you didn't make the playoffs in '98?
Yeah, I did, because we thought, like you said, coming off that season, 8-6, going to Arizona, not winning, but knew that, we had built something, and not to make the playoffs that year, really frustrated you.
Yeah.
And I think it frustrated the team as a whole, and we ended up having some guys leave and, all of that. And, I'm trying to, back then, I'm trying to recruit guys to come to Milwaukee. But, if you're not from the Midwest and you're living in Florida or you're in California, you're not coming to Milwaukee. You're going to go to San Jose, which I would too, probably. You're going to go to Tampa or Orlando, and things like that. So, it was kind of disheartening not making the playoffs and everything else. But, we just said, hey, you know what, we got to try to figure this thing out. And, everybody's goal is to win a championship each year and see what we can do to do that.
Now, you happen to mention something, because I know something which could have been very, I think it was league shattering in the next couple of years, but what I will ask you about. But since you brought it up and you're talking about all these different teams, with the Orlandos, the Arizonas, the Tampas, the San Jose's, et cetera, as I said at this time, some are making a pretty good amount of money, as you've stated earlier too, that, sometimes it wasn't always the up and up when it came to how certain players were coaxed to, I think that's the best word to use, coaxed to come and play for a certain team at a certain time. Did you feel that you were getting your worth when it came to how much they are offering you through your contract?
As anything, when you're a player, you always think you could get more.
Right.
I thought I deserved more, in all honesty. But, where was I going to go play? And like I said, have a name for myself and make good money, in certain places I'd want to go to. Right. We couldn't go to San Jose because you had Wagner. Couldn't go to Arizona because you had Cooper. I couldn't go to LA with the Avengers because they had Hopkins. Mm-hmm. So on and so on. Iowa, everybody had their group of people.
Yeah.
That they had, and so, it was one of those deals where you're like, okay, at some point in time, free agency will hit in this league and all that, and when it does, then I need to make sure that I'm ready to get the value that I think that I'm worth.
Yeah. in '99, again, you guys were just right there at status quo. Same thing at 7-7. You still led the team in receptions, yards, and touchdowns, but it just didn't. I guess it just didn't get any better. I mean, was it an issue of was it the coach, or was it a matter of the players that you couldn't get to stay there with the Mustangs?
Well, I think when you start looking at it here again, so you go 10-4, 8-6, 7-7, 7-7, and we digress 2 years.
Yes.
Was it the system? With that, I don't know exactly. I mean, there are some things, being a captain and all that I didn't agree upon, that I thought some things should have been differently. But you know what? Who am I to say that and do that when I'm a player? I'm not a coach. I'm not a GM. I'm not management. I can only go out and play with what's given to me, and and make the most of it. Now I can voice my opinion a little bit with that, but how far does that get you? Yeah. Because you could just see at 7-7, we weren't getting over the hump. We were just there, like you said, we're status quo. Third in the division. Last in the division, don't make the playoffs. You're playing for your life in week 15. Then all of a sudden it's taken away and it's gone. And you move on to the next season. So it was one of those to where we begin to wonder, after that 99 season, what's going to happen here? What are we going to do? What am I going to do? Is it time for me to go to management and tell management, you know what? I've enjoyed it here and all that, but you guys aren't doing everything you have to do, and I need to move forward. It wasn't that easy, even then in those in those years, to be able to tell them I'm leaving, because that's just not how it worked.
Right.
If they wanted to sign you and they wanted your rights, they had your rights. You had you had nothing to bargain with.
Yep.
And if you were a good player on a team and all that, they weren't going to let you go.
No.
And that was just the unfortunate situation, because we had no union at that time.
Nope.
We didn't have an association or nothing, so you just had to, like I said, you had to play with the cards that were dealt to you.
And the good thing too, I mean, I know I don't want to say that 7-7 wasn't a bad record. I mean, you guys, what people need to remember is that you started off at 0-5. You finished the season at 7-2. So it's as I said, you won when you had to. Got into the playoffs, and then, you run into the Iowa Barnstormers. And that's not a great place to either, like I said, to go play in a playoff game, against them. And it always seemed that, we always had these tough matchups coming out of the box in the playoffs. But that's held by, your record that you have and all that. If we're 13-3, we're not playing those type of teams. Right.
But we were the ones at the bottom of it, fighting, traveling on the road all the time, playing, trying to play playoff games to, advance. And, it just didn't work out.
So glad to get out of that dang time travel machine.
Where'd you go?
I went back to the 80s to grab some of that good sports merch from my favorite defunct franchises. I spent my life savings on that machine.
You bought a time travel machine to buy sports merchandise?
Yeah, gladly.
You could have gone to 503 Sports, right? The website?
No, I didn't think of that at all.
Yeah, they sell all sorts of throwback sports merch from leagues like the World Football League, XFL, UFL, and the Arena Football League, several others.
Shoot.
Yeah, they sell hats, shirts, even custom jerseys from all sorts of vintage sports teams.
Oh, man, I spent a lot of money on that time travel machine.
Well, look, listeners of AFL Rewind get 10% off their first order by using the promo code ARENAFAN at checkout. That might help you out.
Yeah, it does.
Go on over to 503-sports.com and get your merch today.
Do you know anyone who wants to buy a overpriced time travel machine?
No, sorry, I don't.
As I mentioned earlier, this will be a change for the Arena Football League, and I think a lot of people look at this and see this is probably where the league. The league already has its name itself. Games are on TNN. You have your championship games on the Big Four, but it's in the off season of 2000 is where things really began to change. And I wanted to know what your thoughts were on this, because what people need to remember, and I'm sure if you've listened to our series of podcasts, you'll know what I'm about to say. But in late February of 2000, Gary, the league says, you know what, we're not going to play. And if I'm not mistaken, it was a combination of things. It was at the time, horrific injury to James Guidry.
Correct.
And what happened to him and getting hurt when he was quarterback in Portland. And I've read things where it is is that the league was pushing for you guys to unionize in order to get a CBA? Or can you give a little bit of context on what was actually being asked of you as the players?
Yeah, well, I think, what it was, when that situation happened with, with Guidry, us as players, with this, and the league says, okay, we're going to fold, we're not going to play. And us as players go, you have had us by the chain since 87. Mm-hmm. Okay. For 13 years, you have told us what you're going to do, and we had to abide by it.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, guess what? We need to start a union. Okay. We need to figure this out. We need to get paid. We need to have coverage. You don't want to have a guy get hurt, tear an ACL and all that. He's got to go home and he's having to pay for surgeries himself, or, right. Like an incident like Guidry and all of that, life-threatening and everything. And it was time that the league decided to see that, hey, we're on TV, you're drawing money and all of this, not everybody's getting paid a whole lot of money. We don't have insurance coverage, workman's comp during the season. That's pretty much kind of it.
Right.
The living of some of these places, it's time that we have a structured agreement. And it's no different, than when the NFL in 87 decided to do theirs. It just took them longer, And so players came together with some guys out of Chicago that were representatives and all of that. And they decided to, at that point in time, make the AFLPA and went to the league with it. And and said, here's what we got. You're not going to shut the league down because of this, that, or the other. We're going to have a union. We're going to have a CBA. Everybody's going to abide by this, and we're going to move forward. And that's when you started to see twofold with this whole thing. That's where you started to see players getting paid a whole lot of money. Mm-hmm. Okay. And I think the first step or the first domino of the league's downfall.
Okay. Because also in 2000, it also introduced what had really, players could go on 1-year contracts. They could go wherever they wanted, wherever the money was going to bring them. But now it brought in full-fledged free agency for the very first time. And as you said, that was a game changer in this league. It really was.
It was because now, like you said, now you go get paid. That's what we hear. We hear that today in the NFL. Hey, everybody, or even basketball, whatever. Hey, everybody, make it to your second contract.
Yeah.
Get to your second contract, and what you're taken care of.
Yeah.
But it was full-fledged free agency, and it's so funny because it was almost like it was just completely out of the normal. We would see some money being spent that, are you kidding me? As players, because we would get, as players, anytime somebody signed in the union, we got the list of the whole entire contract.
Right.
What it was, what they signed for, everything, so we had all that information, to bargain with or whatever. But yeah, it was crazy. But you know what, you can't fault anybody for it being free agency and going out and, and trying to get your money. As I said earlier, going out to try to get what you think you're worth.
Yeah. Were you ever, before this, a union guy? Or did you never really think of yourself as, because I don't know if you had any experience with being in a union before. You've been in football for so many years, but had you ever considered yourself a union guy?
No, what, I hadn't, because really didn't know what union was all about.
Right.
With all of it until, we decided to put this thing together. Then every team needed a team rep, and I said, well, you know what, I've been here the longest. I know the organization better than anybody. Yeah. Not a lot of people will go in and fight with ownership and coaches and all that. I will, to get what we can get, so then we all had a team representative, and, you learned a lot with it. You really
sure.
did. There's a lot involved in it, because realistically, when this whole thing went through, we didn't even think we'd play in 2000. Right. We thought that it would be a whole nother year before we ever got anything done, and fortunately enough, things got rolling, and, I would say kind of pieced together, maybe not what we all wanted and everything, but it kind of got pieced together, and then we kept moving forward with it.
I find it interesting too, though, Gary, is that, the league does this, we're not going to play. They announced they're not going to play in 2000, but yet less than a month later, I don't think it was less than half a month later, they decide, oh yeah, okay, yeah, we'll go ahead and play. We decided we'll go ahead and play anyways.
Right, because they knew they had to keep those doors opened up because we were a firm believer. Mm-hmm. The league was making money. They were making money. All that you couldn't tell us as players you weren't making money. Yeah. With TV and you see in the stands and this is really even too now you're starting to see all these jerseys being sold and all this stuff and everything, and it just kind of took on its own its own different animal. But like you said, immediately what, now we're going to play. Now it's all good. So let's sit down at the bargaining table. Let's see what we can hammer out and work out, and let's get the season going.
Going through the negotiations like that, what's the one thing that you remember the most about that you learned about the Arena Football League going through that process?
Well,
if you can say,
you're right. You got to take the whole scope of everybody. Yeah. You got to look at, you're bitter with this whole thing because you're like, okay, I'm fighting for what all I never got. Okay. Mm-hmm. But then you have to realize that you have the young guys that have to get a starting point somewhere. Yeah. Okay. So you can't get all yours and not give them, theirs. And so that was the one thing that was different was us trying to hammer out a pay structure,
right.
By years of service. Because us that have been in the league now going on 8 years, we wanted that money to be high, but if that money was high, then the money was, low at the other end of it. Right. So we kind of had to, juggle through all that and, kind of accept it. And you're like, okay, well, if I get to these next 2 years, then I'm going to get this. And then, okay, you know what, I'll figure all that out. But it was weird sitting at a table with, 16 players, representatives, 16 owners, lawyers, and the whole 9 yards. And then walking out. Yeah. It's like something you see on TV.
Yeah. What, one thing that you remember that the owners and the executives were the toughest to budge on? I'm trying to ask the question in such a way where you can answer it.
Right.
Remember anything in particular?
Well, I tell you what, signing bonuses. Mm-hmm. Okay. Because every player wanted their money up front, and the owners did not want to budge on signing bonuses.
Because it's guaranteed.
Guaranteed money. You're absolutely right. And that was the hardest thing to get out of them. And that was one of the hardest things that I think, like I said, now the quarterbacks, the quarterbacks were getting theirs.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
There was no doubt with that, But yeah, the signing bonuses and all that, I think the guaranteed, we could go like 3-year contracts at that point in time. Mm-hmm. That was very hard for those owners to swallow a little bit.
How did it change your dynamic? I mean, I know we really skirted over the season itself. I mean, for the third straight year, you guys did go 7-7, but do you think it changed the dynamic in any way? Because now you have free agency. Now you can actually, I'm sure many of the contracts and many of the pay that the players were getting has changed. Do you think it changed your dynamic in any way, or did it bring you closer together, knowing that you beat the evil empire, so to speak, that year?
Right. Well, you had, you kind of had a mixture of both. Mm-hmm. I think you had some guys on the team because, now all of a sudden everything's structured out. Everybody kind of knows what everybody's making, and it kind of, I'm not going to say had animosity to one another.
Right.
But I think it kind of broke a little bit of what you built and what you mended. And it, okay. And it really shouldn't, because, at the end of the day, it's about developing this union and getting things paid for and all that we've never had. It shouldn't be about who's getting what and this, that, or the other. But I think that did that. And I think that, created a lot of, the culture was not so close. I've seen fights and I've seen arguments in practice over salaries. That's just, just shouldn't be there,
Yeah.
And everything. So yeah, I think it kind of took a step back with it.
I've asked the question before. I ask you. You don't have to answer it, because I've heard some people say how it changed from 98, 99 to 2000. Would you be able to give us a ballpark figure of what you were offered for that year now that there is a new CBA?
Oh boy, you know what? I think in 2000. I'm trying to think exactly. I was probably sitting, and and I'm going to be honest, I wasn't at the higher end of my group,
Really?
Which was kind of disappointing. Yeah. I think I was probably sitting 55, 60 maybe.
Okay.
And, and I knew, and I knew there's 4 or 5, there's 4 or 5 others above me. But, here again, I could either walk, go somewhere else, or I could stay. I'd been here a long time. I had wrapped up in my contract. I got year-round housing, so my housing was paid for year-round.
Nice.
A lot of players left. I stayed here in the community. I worked community events. I got paid for, so I did a lot of extras. So the salary-wise was just during football, but I had a lot of other perks with that.
Yeah.
But to me, I should have gotten those perks a long time ago. It shouldn't have had us to do what we did as a group of players for the owners to not say, you know what, these guys are worth this. And I get it. It's a business, and you save $1, I totally understand that. But, it almost broke the league, right there. And that league could have been done in 2000 at that point. They could have just shut the doors completely.
Yeah.
But then, like you said, then all of a sudden you just started seeing salaries skyrocket from here.
Yeah. Third year at 7-7, you guys running into Tampa Bay, but what a game you guys had at Tampa that year.
Oh.
I mean, even though you guys were 7-7, you guys took them to the limit that year. You really did. I mean, I'm double checking the box score here. I mean, you guys scored with 25 seconds left to pull within 8.
Yep.
And you had a chance to, as I said, I mean, this is a Tampa Bay team at that time that is them, Coach Markham, Lawrence Samuels, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yep.
You guys, like I said, even though you were 7-7, you took this Tampa Bay team literally to almost to the buzzer.
And I think that's with that team that we had, we knew that we had the ability. Especially going into Tampa and, having that opportunity there towards the end, a few mistakes here or there, and we're probably on top of all of it. So that's when you look at it, well, there's 7-7 record. We take Tampa to, the brink of almost beating them with the squad that they had. What's going on here? Why are we always, at this point? We never get past this point. And then you started wondering, trying to think about things and all of that. And, we move into 2001, we started hearing issues about the Bradley Center's going to renovate. And at that point in time, you had the Bucks in there, you had the Admirals in there, you had the Milwaukee Wave in there, you had us. Well, there's only certain times they could renovate. And, we begin to hear rumbles that, after the 2001 season, they were going to, renovate that arena, and it could be our last time playing arena football in Milwaukee. And that was before the 2001 season,
Wow.
So it was kind of weird, hearing that and knowing, on the back end of it before we played this season that this could be our last, and then we get into 2001 and, it is what it is from there.
Do you think hearing that news before the season began really attributed to you guys going 3-11? Because you've been a very steady team over the last 4 years.
Yeah. I think, because you think about it, I think a lot of guys, now we're talking we're in free agency now and you can sign multiple year contracts. Mm-hmm. I'm not going there for 1 year. Okay. Yeah. They're not going to pay the money for 1 year. Because we all talked about it, everybody asked me what's going on up there. I said, gentlemen, listen, I can't tell you what's going to happen past 2001. I don't know. I've got 1 year left. That's 2001. And then I don't know what's going to happen. Yeah. And then I think that was some of the downfall with it. We had a disappointing year that year, didn't expect it to be that, but it was very disheartening.
Yeah. I also, if I wanted to ask you too, which I forgot to do, for 2000 when free agency started, did any other team contact you to come to them, or were you set in it that you, as you said before, you're comfortable? Yeah, at certain perks that you may not get in other cities. You're part of the community, a long time standing team at that time. Did any other team reach out to you to try and entice you to come to their city?
Yeah, well, I talked to Trig in Grand Rapids, and I thought I was probably going to do that deal. But we couldn't, come to numbers and all that. I talked to Coach Markham down in Tampa, a little bit with that. But here again, I felt like, I was comfortable. You know what? This is home. I'm getting to play here in front of everybody that I know. I've built a name here. I've done so much here. I teach here. I coach here. Everybody knows me, So why would I pick that up and move that somewhere else and have to start over?
Right.
You know, to me, it wasn't all about the money.
Right.
You know, as anybody, you know, you live comfortable, you do whatever you want to do. But it was just about playing ball, having fun, because as you said it, and even to this day, when you see that purple and teal, the name Compton is like, that's like what goes with it.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, it really, really is. You know, I got guys with Beanie Babies and jerseys and, you know, mini helmets on Twitter, you know, that's all, you know, that pops up. And, you know, and I have all those, and I'm sitting here looking at all of them now down in my basement, you know, and I'm like, you know, that's what we built. That's what I built there, you know. So I'm going to ride this thing out. You know what? I'm going to let it play. I'm going to try to figure it all out. And if it doesn't, and it does go away, then I'll have to pick up and I'll have to figure things out.
Well, for 2000 and 2001, you also didn't have your quarterback, so to speak, for the very first time. Was it different not having Hamill throwing the ball to you and instead having Kevin McDougal? I'm not saying Kevin was back. I mean, Kevin did make a name for himself in the league, but I mean, you're going from Hamill to one of the one of the greats to Kevin McDougal.
Yeah, it was different because now, you know, like you said, now all of a sudden you're dealing with with a new quarterback. K-Mac I liked a lot. You know, he come from Notre Dame, played at one of the biggest places, played in the biggest games, you know, and all of that. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't, you know, it really wasn't the same as with Todd. Like I said, you know, Todd and I had developed just so many things, you know, and everything. But K-Mac was good. You know, I think in 2001 we did, I think numbers wise, we did some pretty good stuff.
Yeah. Okay. Even though you were 3-7, I guess, you know, what's funny too, Gary, is that when you said you'd heard about all that stuff early in the year, about possibly this would be the last year over at the Bradley Center. And then you play in the preseason at the new arena in Milwaukee over at the U.S. Cellular.
Yeah. How about that?
That had to have been a slap in the face.
You know, and that's funny because I'd almost forgotten that. And you knew it was an issue when the Nets were hanging 3 seats over the walls.
Oh boy!
because the confines of the U.S. Cellular would not fit the arena football. Well, to me, if I was a businessman way back when, and I had the Bradley Center and I had the U.S. Cellular, mm-hmm. you know, okay, would I have maybe put the game in the U.S. Cellular and made, you know, fit it up that way? Maybe somebody should have known it wasn't going to work. You know.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we knew we had issues right there because then all of a sudden you're like, you know what, just don't care anymore. Okay. Well, why should I care? Yeah. You know, we can't even play a preseason game in here because look at this, you know.
Yeah, and what's funny is that what people need to remember too is that even though this was in Milwaukee, it wasn't a home game technically because at the time, I think if I'm not mistaken, Florida, you know, it was a neutral site game with Florida.
Yep, Florida was traveling. Yep, they had like a traveling. Yep, that's true. So yeah, so we were the away team in the U.S. Cellular across the street from our home arena.
Oh man. I at least have to touch on too is that all the issues that you had that year, it really didn't start off that well. Considering that first game versus Indiana at home, you guys just get shellacked, and everybody knows arena football. The Arena Football League, the Arena Football game itself. I'm not talking the other indoor games because I know that is slightly different. But when you only score 6 points, and I think it's still to this day, it's still, I think, second or third worst for a team scoring. I'm sure it didn't really help how that season was starting.
No, it didn't. You know, like you said, you go from the preseason, then we go to this one. Indiana comes in, okay, who just moved from Albany, okay, down to Indiana, come into our place, and we put up numbers like that. You know, now you become really disgruntled. You know, what is management trying to do here? You know, it's almost like you're thinking of the movie Major League. Yeah. You know, you know, well, we're not going to do nothing for them whatsoever. You know, we want it to fail so we have a way out. Yeah. You know, so that didn't start off great.
I know you've mentioned it. I don't want you to. I know you've been careful in how you've been saying this, but what the name of your ownership group? Everybody has their own opinion. They've had positive names to it. Some people have been positive. Some people have been negative to it. Mm-hmm. Why did this ownership group seem to go from one of the best in the league when you first got there to being one that you're like, it was just like, this is happening with the arena. You guys are basically going to get pushed out, and you seem to be rolling your eyes when it comes to when you talk about this ownership group. Why do you think they changed? Do you think it had to do with the change with the CBA and the new Players Association, the money itself? Why do you think this ownership group changed literally from the beginning to the end, so to speak?
I think a lot to do with it. When you're in a city, okay, and you're doing things around the community, and you don't stand by your word, if I should say.
Yeah.
There's only so many bridges that you burn before there's no bridges left to ride in the city.
Right.
And you know what? And I think that's part of it. And I think a lot of it had to do with the CBA too. I'm sure the Bradley Center wasn't, as any arena, wasn't, cheap to rent. But you know what? You look at the number of thousands of people that are there, that are paying tickets. And, we had like 6,500 season ticket holders.
Yeah.
And so I think it just got to the point to where I don't know if it got too big for them, because after they left Milwaukee, they went down to Fort Myers and got an Arena 2 team, which IE would have started out just like, Milwaukee did in the 94 season. So I don't know if it got too big for them not to be able to run the organization like that. But my whole thing of it is for, all that we did for so many years, if that's a case or whatever, just everybody be up front, sell the organization to somebody. Get out of it now. And, because there were some big spenders. We're talking about teams going for like tens of millions of dollars.
Somewhere at that time, that's true.
Because that was, back then, that was, so you could have sold, you could sell that thing and get out if that's what you were doing. And I just think it got too big for them. And you know what? They let it go, and it is what it is, because I hear people to this day, run into the store or whatever, that were season ticket holders and just told, and they all say it, how disappointing the 2001 season was for management to just the way that everything was done here. It's just very unfortunate.
Obviously, after the 2001 season, it, as everything they told you, even so many years, the rumors came true. The team is not going to exist anymore. You get a new lease on life, so to speak. What made you decide to head over to Indiana in 2002?
Well, as CBA money got big. They lost a piece of their puzzle, Greg Hopkins.
Yep.
And Hopkins left and went to L.A. and signed a big contract in L.A. And so Coach Hohensee obviously called me right away and asked me, would I be interested in playing there in Indiana? It wasn't too far from here. My wife was from this area and all of that. And lo and behold, I was able to talk her into, going 4 hours down the road to Indiana, there, and got there, was glad to be a part there, and something new on life.
Yeah. What was so even though Coach Ho was head coaching in Chicago, he was one of the main reasons why we decided to go and go with Coach Daly in Indiana?
Correct. Okay. That was part of, and talking to him, with that, and and then Daly, we were able to come to an agreement, like I said, and be able to go down there, play for them.
How different were those coaching styles? Because I in my career, I saw Coach Ho in Albany, I saw Coach Daly in Albany, so I saw how they coached. But what was the difference? Just by your reaction, I can only imagine what your answer is going to be. What's the difference between Frazier and Coach Daly as a head coach?
You know what? No bullshit.
Yeah.
Straight to the point. Going to get work done. That's how Coach Daly operated.
Yeah.
And that was a different culture for me. Okay. Now Eddie Brown and them had been, with that group for a while.
Yeah. Sure.
And Eddie and I were good friends. And he told me coming there that it's going to be different. He said it ain't going to be like it was in Milwaukee. This is kind of how things run here. And I was like, okay, you know what? I got no issue with it. Let's go with it and see what happens.
What do you think? What is it? I mean, you can't seem to get away from those 500 records. You go into Indiana over for Indianapolis for the very first time, and you guys end up being at 7-7. I mean, it's not that you had all the pieces. I mean, Raymond Filial, everybody knows the name Raymond Filial. He was a very good quarterback in the league. You, Eddie Brown. Leroy Thompson. I'm just looking at the roster here.
Jay Jones. Yeah.
Yeah.
We had a
Van Johnson also, and then it's just that. Why were you a 7-7 team that year?
You know what? I started looking at it now that you start thinking about it. You're going, my gosh, am I the problem? You know. You know what? It was one of those new things. You know, there were a lot of new pieces. You know, here again, free agency. You know, you got a lot of guys that. You know, and they had a good, you know, a nucleus, a group. I think we had like 9 or 10 new faces there that year.
Okay.
You know, and that's different, obviously, to mesh as a team. You know, with that, and like you said, you know, we couldn't get over the hump there, and you know, struggled that year.
How's it going from being the guy in Milwaukee to being a number 2 or number 3 or whatever it was, whatever what you consider yourself? Because you know your stats were down the year, but mind you, people need to remember. You had Eddie Brown there. Yes, it was near the end of his career, but still, what was your thought on taking I don't want to say a lesser role, but not getting the ball as much?
No, sure, no, I understand. You know, I think it's kind of that way. You know, sometimes you look at going places, and you know, you're like, you know what, I just want to win, no matter what it takes. You know, I don't have to be that guy anymore. I was that guy. Mm-hmm. You know, and that's what, you know, and that's what Eddie and I talked about, you know, and I knew that, you know what, when you think of the Firebirds, that's the first person you think of, Eddie Brown, you know, and, you know, it's like, hey, you know what, I'm just here to, you know, to do my role, to do whatever. I'm here to help any way I can. You know what, let's just go out and see what we can do.
Was it pretty sweet that year of the 7 wins that you had? Was it pretty sweet to sweep Grand Rapids that year?
You know what, that was a nice little taste. You know, you wish you would have done it on the other end, you know, there in Milwaukee. But it was nice. It was nice there, you know, to beat them twice and, you know, kind of, if you want to say, kind of get a little redemption.
Yeah. How ironic. And by the way, even though you were 7-7, you did make the playoffs. You ended up having to play Dallas that year. How ironic was it, Gary, though, that you ended up playing your playoff game where you started your career at Reunion Arena?
Yeah, I know. You know, that was weird going back home, you know, and having all my family there to watch. And like you said, playing in Reunion Arena again, you know, it's weird. It's kind of like everything comes twofold, you know, and all that. It was, you know, kind of one of those joyous moments, you know, because, you know, not knowing at that point in time, you know, I'd been in the league 9 years, you know, didn't know what might happen at that point in time. But yeah, it was a pretty special moment.
In 2003, actually, did at any point you end up in Grand Rapids? Were you talked to in Grand Rapids?
I ended up in Grand Rapids in 2002.
Yeah, I think it was end of 2002 that you, because were you traded?
I was there like half a season.
Okay.
Yep. I got traded over there to Coach Trigg. They had some injury issues.
Okay.
And he wanted me to come over there. We talked, you know, obviously there at Indianapolis, you know, and Coach decided to work a trade out, so sent me over to Grand Rapids in 2002.
Did you? And if I'm not mistaken, that's been the first time you were traded, right?
That's the first time. That is correct. Yep. I've been traded twice. I was traded then, and then I was traded in Tampa to go to Philadelphia in 2004.
Nope. As a player, and you knew why you were going there, because I've heard that, by the way, the story you just said, I've heard before, is where you're needed elsewhere. You're doing okay on a specific team, but you're needed elsewhere to hopefully improve the league, improve the team, improve the league, et cetera, et cetera.
Right.
How did it feel to be traded for the very first time? I mean, now that I know why you went, but
right.
How did you feel?
You know, it was one of those deals to where, you know, like I said, you know, being in a place, just wanting to help out, but kind of seeing how things were, you know, and not to say that, you know, not my worth or anything like that, but just, you know, maybe thinking my role would have been a little bit bigger than what it was, you know, and then having the ability to, you know, of what happened in GR to be able to, you know, to ask for a trade and for them, you know, because they didn't have to grant a trade, you know, but they were nice enough, you know, to do that and to grant that trade and, you know, send me back to where Coach Trigg was coaching.
Yeah. And it's true, but people trades usually happened at the beginning of the season, right for camp. trades rarely occurred in the AFL. That's one thing that, besides head coaches rarely getting fired during the season and trades, they rarely occurred in the Arena League.
Yep, that is true. You would see a lot of people get cut and a lot of people get picked up. But and part of the reason why with the trades and all that, because now if a team trades somebody, okay, now they've got to get that player to that destination.
Yeah.
Okay, so now what all does that involve? There you go. There's more money involved in all of that. What does it take? So, you didn't see too many trades at all.
No. And you did well, by the way. I got to at least mention to everybody, you did do well in Grand Rapids, so you did help that team. I mean, almost 700 yards, 17 touchdowns. So it all worked out for you in the end, obviously.
Always.
Yeah. How did you end up? Obviously, you're there. You have your old head coach. How did you end up in Tampa Bay?
Well, so 03 would have been actually the season 02. Obviously, it's free agency time.
Right.
Okay. Now, Trigg had Michael Baker, Thomas Bailey. What's his name? Number 15 for them. That was a stud.
I'm looking here. Willis Marshall.
Yep, had Marshall.
Steve Smith.
Had Steve Smith
and Terrence Shaw, Ricky Ross.
So he had all those guys at receiver. Okay. Yeah. Now I'm going into be 33 years old. Okay. And so, he told me before before that, hey, you know what, if you can go anywhere and get money, that you think you can get or whatever, however, I would love to see you win a championship before you retire because of what all you've done for the league.
Right.
And I took that in and said thanks, and everything. And then I happened to get a call from Coach Markle and wanted to know would I be interested in coming to Tampa. And, my first reaction was, well, did Lawrence Samuels leave, Coach? Or, what's going on, And he's like, no, Law Dog's still here, but, we need some depth, at that position. And, I know you've been a solid player and like for you to come join our organization, on a 1-year deal. Here's what it is. And, and I said, okay, I'll think about it, and kind of, worked around some other places and everything. Thought, what, I can go to Tampa. I think it'd be kind of neat. I'd have a chance to win something, and decided to go there in 03.
It's kind of a good thing you did. Everybody's talking about winning a championship. You'd gone through your entire career, and it's true that many players may not win a championship in their career, but careers winding down slightly. 2003, you made the best choice. I mean, 12-4 for the Storm. You win your first championship.
Yes.
How? After everything that you've done, Gary, throughout your career up to this point, now first you're winning your first championship. As soon as that clock hit, all zeros at home versus Arizona in front of almost 21,000 people. How'd you feel?
You know what? I mean, it was great, to finally be, I guess you say, at the pinnacle of that, to be able to, take that trophy and raise that trophy, because at the end of it, that's what we all play for. That's what we all want. And to look back at, all those years where I played and, came close but never got there, to be able to go somewhere like Tampa, and we had all the horses, and to be able to win that championship was, it was satisfying. It was, almost like, I could have walked off, I could have rode the horse into the sunset on the beach and been like, what, I'm all good.
Yeah. Any different feelings going into the championship game itself? Because as I said, it was the very first time you'd actually started to suit up for a championship game. I mean, you guys were such a good team. I mean, for you personally, any different thoughts that went through your head getting ready getting ready for the Arena Bowl? Just,
what, it's another game. That's how you had to look at it. You prepare the same way, you go about things the same way. You can't make it any bigger than it is. And just go out and, contribute how you may be able to contribute. When your number's called, do what you can do and see what may happen.
How did it at any point? Because I know players are different. They block things out as best as possible and stay in, keep their mindset in for the game. Did it matter that you guys are going to be on national television? I mean, we're talking not cable. You're going to be on national TV on NBC.
Yeah, and that's what's really cool about it. You're on the biggest stage that there is. I mean, back then, it was that was primetime football. It was on. Everybody was watching it. It was just a neat atmosphere. It was a neat culmination to a season. Mm-hmm. It was kind of a great, like I said, ending to a career. Mm-hmm. That because so many people, when I look at so many players, I look at Jim Kelly, to play in so many Super Bowls and never win.
Dan Marino too.
Dan Marino, mm-hmm. to do, all the great players that have come through our league that have been so close and never been able to win a championship. Yeah. To win one and be one of a small group, it was very satisfying.
Where is your championship ring right now?
It sits in a case holder up in my room.
Yeah. When was the last time did you take it out and actually wear it?
Probably 5-6 years ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it's something to look at, some kind of cool to look at for your kids to see and, mm-hmm. And to have it.
Yeah, and you can say, now your kids can say, you did win a championship.
That's exactly right.
What was it? I've heard many a story, but I had to at least ask you, what was it like having Coach Markham as a head coach?
He... and I go back and, you talk about Jerry Trice, and, Jerry Trice was part of that tree of Markham's.
That's true. Yeah.
My head coach in college coached with Coach Markham. So I had gotten a taste of a little bit of what he was like. But I tell you what, you talk about a gentleman that would coach his ass off, but then he would tell you what you did wrong in a heartbeat, mm-hmm. and then come right up behind you after the game's over and tell you how much he cares about you. He was, there's so many reasons why that he's won as many Arena Bowls as he has.
Yeah.
And, he's had a lot of talent and all that, but we always know that talent doesn't always win things. He was a great coach. It was very, very fun to play that year for him. I will say that.
I can only imagine, I only knew of him. I've said it before. That's one of my arena football regrets is I never got to meet Coach Markham. But I'm living vicariously through all your stories. So
right, yeah. Well, he was definitely. I'm sure all the stories you have heard and a lot more. That was definitely that man.
Oh, I'm sure. You talk about your second time getting traded. How you just win a championship and now you're off to another team. You're off to the Soul. How do you end up getting traded over to the Soul?
Well, as we'll all know, Coach Trigg was the head coach of the Philadelphia Soul.
Mm-hmm. They were first year, by the way.
First year expansion team. Okay, he didn't have a lot of depth and a lot of people that had a lot of experience, and so he contacted Coach Markham, and I think told him, this was during the preseason actually, and told him, said, hey, I need Compton up here with me, with my team. I don't have a lot of experience. Tim came and talked to me and, would you want to do this? Yeah. And I pretty much told him, at that point, I said, this is pretty much my last year anyway. I said, I'd kind of say, Coach, no regrets to you or none, but I'd kind of like to go maybe finish where I started with him. Mm-hmm. And, said, no problem. They worked out a trade and, I went off to Philly.
Who'd you get traded for? I didn't have a chance to look that up, but who'd you get traded for?
You know what? Probably a case of beer and a pack of cigars or something. Who knows?
And then the league called it futures.
The league called it futures. Exactly right.
What was it like having Bon Jovi and Jaws, having them as the ownership group?
Now that's, what? Now you're talking about, some high profile people.
Yeah.
Bon Jovi really did it right there in Philly, and so did Jaws. They had that city by storm. They did a lot of good things there. The logo, the colors, the name, was really, really cool. Did a really, really great job there. And obviously, still around to this day, and everything. But, it was a great experience up there.
Now, as you had throughout your career, you happened to start off with many other teams where Coach Trigg was your head coach. And you also happened to have Todd Hamill as your quarterback also, which happened to be in this case also. He was also on this team. How did you feel about this season itself? Because obviously it is your last season. You said yourself at the beginning is probably going to be your last. How did you feel about the season itself? Did the record really mean anything, or was it just more or less the camaraderie and being able to play?
I think it was a camaraderie and being able to play. Records will be what they are.
Mm-hmm.
I always played the game hard. And I think everybody will always, that's how they looked at me is I'm just a hard-nosed player. And I played it that way, even up there. Just wanted to go out, have a good time. Obviously we want to win. I mean, that's what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
But winning isn't the most important thing. With that, let's go out and, do what we do. It's an expansion team. Maybe we don't, expect a whole lot, with it being right out of the gate as your first year. And, see if we can't put this team on the map and all of that and, let it build from there.
Yeah. What finally, as I said, I know you'd been, at least sounded like you were thinking of it before you came to Philadelphia, but what finally made you decide to end your career as an Arena Football League player?
Well, what actually happened was, so Pat O'Hara, who we remember, who was, been in the Arena Football League for many, many years, during the off season, he was pretty much a football movie finder guy. Okay. Any given Sunday.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Invincible, all that. Well, they were shooting the longest yard at that point in time. And so I had a chance to go to California for 4 months and shoot the football scene of it.
Okay.
And during the second half of the football scene, I got hit and tore my rotator cuff.
Oh, boy.
And once there again, and I was thinking about retiring anyway, but at that point in time, I knew that it was, I was in, rehab for like 14 months.
Oh, boy. Okay.
With that. So, so that was pretty much that's pretty much when I knew it was time to hang it up, but like I said, I would have hung it up after that 2004 year, and everything, because I felt like I had accomplished what I wanted to accomplish, and go out and, say I did what I wanted to do.
Yeah. You look through your awards that you had during your career, Gary. I mean, it's, many, Man of the Year for your Build for Tough Man of the Year. You're on quite a few first team All Arenas. You're on the All Ironman team. You made the second team 15th anniversary team in 2001. You look back at your career. Are you happy with your? Many players may not look. It's just I want to play, and that's necessarily. I don't care about the records. I don't care about the stats. I just want to have fun with what I'm doing. When you look back at your career, are you satisfied?
You know what? I am. Like I said, there's always a path that's built for us. We never know why it's to go that route. But, I was able to do a lot of things in this league. I feel like I was, one of the founding fathers of it because way back when, it was still going up until I retired and, laid the groundwork for some of these other guys that, were able to come through and benefit from it. Mm-hmm. The biggest award, I think, in all honesty, that I cherish the most is probably the 2001 Built for Tough.
Okay.
Man of the Year, because that's a two-way player.
Yep.
And it was nominated every week, and it was picked by the league, and then every team had a player. Then it went to a board, and to be nominated by my peers as that guy, I think is bigger than a championship. And everything, just showing kind of the culmination of, what all I had done. And the biggest special moment about it was they did when 9/11 went down. Mm-hmm. In the ESPN News magazine, they did an article, and it was in that episode of that magazine. So I had the 9/11 cover with the write-up of me being the Built for Tough Player of the Year. So it was kind of cool how that all went together.
Yeah, quite.
And everything. So I have a big frame of all that, and everything up down in the basement and all that. But yeah, I think that's just, I think that's the one that I kind of cherish the most.
What made you try your hand at being a head coach? Because you were hired by the Bakersfield Blitz, the AF2 in 06 and 07 as their head coach. What made you decide to try head coaching?
Well, you know how it is. When we all get done playing, we all think we can coach. You come to find out, not all great players make great coaches. But I tell you what, in 06 in Bakersfield, and I had Cedric Walker, who played in the Arena League for a long time, as my defense coordinator. And I had Corey Stone as my line coach, who played in the Arena Football League. We built a team there in Bakersfield, and we came 6 seconds away from playing for a divisional championship the very first year against Spokane. And they beat us on a last-second play, and everything. And so I was like, okay, coaching's easy. This is easy. Shoot, look what I got here. But as we find out in AF2, you have a huge turnover in players.
Yes. Yep.
You hardly ever have the same team and all of that. And, spent that 07 year in Bakersfield and thought, you know what, maybe this kind of isn't for me. And then went home and, kind of bounced around, did some other coaching gigs. That's obviously, what, and I'm sure you're probably going to get into it, what brought me back here to Milwaukee.
I was going to ask you, because in 09, you end up home, so to speak, to finish off your football, your arena football career. You end up as the head coach of the Milwaukee Iron, and at that point it was the AF2 version, I think, if I'm not mistaken.
Correct.
Of the Milwaukee Iron. But what drew you back to Milwaukee?
Well, that was obviously, they called me, wanted to know would I be interested in discussing arena football future in Milwaukee. And of course I asked, right off the bat, well, what's going on? What is it? And they said, well, we're going to be part of the AF2. We've got Harley Davidson tied in, with the colors and everything. Yeah. And, we'd like for you to be the head coach and the GM. Well, I'd been living in Indiana since 01. I, made home there. We lived there for about 8 years. And like I said, my wife is from this area. And so I told her, and she was ecstatic because she'd have a chance to come back home. Right. And so we packed up from Indiana, came back to Milwaukee, and started the AF2 here with the Iron. Obviously, they wanted to draw my name with it,
right?
Which obviously was a good idea for them, with everything, and did that for a little while. Like you said, kind of got out of it, said I was done with it, and just kind of went on about my business and kind of put arena football, kind of shut the door. After probably 18 years of it. And you know what? Like I said, it's been a great life for me, and I enjoyed the ride.
One thing I at least wanted to ask you about, because not many who didn't, fans may have followed just the AFL and not necessarily AF2. What was it like for that exhibition game that you guys played in 09 versus the New Zealand Overstayers?
Oh, boy.
Because at that time, if I'm not mistaken, people may not remember, is that the league did have some training camps over in Australia and New Zealand, and it was sort of a trade-off where they had some games there, had some exhibitions there, and they also had some exhibitions here.
Yes. Yeah.
You guys got chosen to shellac.
Yes.
New Zealand.
Would be an understatement, right?
Yeah.
It was so funny because I had to tell my guys, take it easy. You don't play this like we normally play our game against everybody. And I think I ended up sending 2 or 3 guys over there on their side just so they could finish the game.
Oh, really?
Yeah. But that's kind of part of AF2 and all of that. It was like you said, it was kind of a startup league, kind of the way the arena football was, as it brought up. We use it as a farm system, if you want to say it yet, in smaller cities. There had even been talks way back when we were going to do this back in the heyday of the Arena Football League, where you'd be able to have, you could call up anybody you wanted to at any point in time.
Right.
With that, and that's kind of what the AF2 was developed to be. But yeah, it was fun. It was a good time.
I have to at least ask you, because obviously you go to at that time when you were coaching for Milwaukee, that's the only arena football that's being played at that time, and you've been a part of the initial CBA back in 2000. And obviously the league itself had folded, and as you said, possibly those dominoes fell the way they did, and the league folded for the third time in 2008. You had been a part of the league so much. What were your thoughts when you heard that the league decided to not come back and to declare bankruptcy and not come back in 2009?
It's it's kind of a bitter moment, because you were a part of something for so long, but yet you were a part of something that, may I say, helped those dominoes fall. Yeah, you kind of got a good and a bad to it. Mm-hmm. With it, but you always think that it would survive. There's always a way that it would survive. It's survived for so many years the way it's been done.
Yeah.
There's always another ownership group, or there's always moving to another city, or, it's kind of one of those things where when you see the logo or you hear arena football, 26, 27 years, you just don't think that it's going away.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate. It really, really is, because now we only have memories. On a league that's extinct now. But I tell you what a lot of great memories, what a lot of great people, and what a lot of great players.
Were you very surprised, because I said you were part of the first real CBA. Were you surprised at that time that the league could sustain itself on at that time where, players were making mid to high five, and quarterbacks, some were making, mid six figures for a quarterback and for some of the named players?
Right.
Did you ever think it would get to that point? Because I think at that point, you were on the second CBA at that time. So
yeah, you begin to wonder, because you knew that teams relied on sponsorships and ticket sales.
Mm-hmm.
Even on the second one back then, when they were generating the money from ESPN on the TV contract, there was no money being changed hands at that point. So you knew. If you found a team that didn't have a lot of sponsorships, or they weren't putting their butts in the stands, you knew that it was in trouble, because all these owners that are making money, well, guess what they're having to do? They're having to funnel money to that other side to keep that team afloat, because they want their league to stay afloat, because they can't afford to have their assets go down.
Right.
And, like I said, it was unfortunate, because you see so many, you read about it and you see so many ownerships that come through, and, I've seen so many people put so much money into something and get burned so bad.
Yeah.
With it, but it's one of those deals. Like I said, it was a great league, a lot of great people. I couldn't be more thankful for the way my career went, and had the ability and the chance to play in this for so many years.
Are you ever going to get to a point where you hope that nobody recognizes you? Because it's you know what I mean? Because I know your career's over, but you were the face of a team for so long. As I said, you are synonymous with Todd Hamill and the Milwaukee Mustangs.
It's it's weird, because my son's a junior in high school now.
Yeah.
And he sees the the helmets and the the Beanie Babies and the stuff. He follows Twitter, he follows me.
And the game's on YouTube.
And the game's on YouTube, and and Tom's doing a great job bringing back historical moments and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But it's so funny when people will recognize me and say, you were Compton from the Mustangs. My son thinks that's just he gets a kick out of that. that he, Dad, you're old now. How do they still remember? But it's, like I said, it's just kind of one of those things, I embellish it. I cherish it. It's just, it's one of those things you do, and you enjoy it. And, I go play golf with buddies, and we were playing golf 2 weeks ago, and we were playing into another foursome up front of us. And lo and behold, they were season ticket holders for the Mustangs. And we sat around and talked for 20 minutes and all that. It was a great time.
That's hilarious. I've asked this question too. You had such a storied career. You got your championship. I said everybody knows your name in the AFL. Would you consider yourself a legend?
A legend is hard. I'd consider myself a great player.
Okay.
When I see legends, I think of Michael Jordan's.
Okay.
Those type of people.
Mm-hmm.
I see myself as one that crafted my game out that was special, hard worker. Wouldn't call myself a GOAT, wouldn't call myself a legend, just one of the pieces to a big puzzle.
Okay. Because you played with quite a few legends in your career. So I can say honestly, because I know your career, I would place you in that group. Well, so I would call you legend.
I appreciate that very much.
Gary, let's say 5 years down the line, okay, the Arena Football League does not come back, okay, for whatever, because you said it's died and it's been reborn many times already.
Mm-hmm.
Somebody comes up to you in 5 years, somebody who really has never heard about the league before, and they want to know more about it. They saw it somewhere, and they ask you what they want to know about the Arena Football League. What would you tell them?
Very simple. Football in a shoebox. That's how I classify it.
We want to thank Gary for joining us this episode of the podcast. And as you heard, the city of Milwaukee meant a lot to him. And anybody who followed the league during his time that he was playing in the AFL, you can see that the fans loved him, the city loved him, and obviously the league he played for loved him also. And it didn't matter that he played in Milwaukee for almost his entire season, but he really made a name for himself in the league. If you happen to miss any of the previous episodes of the podcast, you can go over to SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and the audio version over on YouTube. So we hope you're staying healthy and safe during this new normal that we're calling 2020. We will be back soon with a brand new episode to have more stories from players, executives, etc., from the Arena Football League. So for everybody here at AFL Rewind, I'm Tim Capper. Watch the rebound off the net.